Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infinite Abilities Podcast. I am your host, Nick Yerhart, and we are here to encourage each other to find our own unique abilities. Let's go. All right, everyone. So on this episode, we have Duncan, and when we first talked, I wasn't at home, so we had to make it really short and sweet. But I could tell that this guy was going to be an amazing guest. So let's get right into it. Duncan, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I do a YouTube podcast and channel called PDA Dad UK. I am the lone boring neurotypical member of my family. My son is ADHD, my wife is bipolar and autistic, and my daughter is autistic with a PDA profile, which is pathological demand avoidance. And it's become kind of my life mission, I guess, is to see the world change, to start accepting and adapting to neurodivergence and disabilities in general, rather than us consistently forcing people into, square pegs into round holes, basically. Like, let's start making the hole that little bit rounder.
I'm right there with you.
I figured you would be, yeah.
Yeah, I live with cerebral palsy, so for me, it was, my whole childhood was growing up with people telling me what I can and cannot do. Like teachers and doctors and adults, and like I learned very quickly, thankfully, because of my parents. My parents did not do that. They will always push me to figure out what I could do for myself instead of me holding myself back.
I'm good friends with the Abley family. So Eva Abley was a finalist on Britain's Got Talent a few years ago. She's a comedian who has cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And I've interviewed her a few times on my channel, and she's amazing because she embodies exactly what you're talking about. That, she wouldn't take no for an answer. She's a brilliant comedian. She's now an author. She is just absolutely brilliant and absolutely. I mean, she was a finalist on Britain's Got Talent, so
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. And I think just proof that, I think disability is just a horrible word because often it limits the perception of the other abilities that are there. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
I prefer to say different abilities.
I think that's a common one I've heard. I don't know where to place it. I think the danger can be if you don't use the word disability, people dismiss it as something that's not an extra challenge in people's lives.
I agree with
By
that
the
too.
same token,
Yep.
if you're not making that differentiation that disability doesn't mean that you are less capable. It just means you're differently capable.
Yeah.
And that might take some adaptations. That might take some rethinking of how we've structured the world around us to suit. Yeah.
I'm right there with you. With me, every day I have to figure out how to do things in my own way in order to get
Yeah.
them done. My hands, they don't work the greatest, but I'm grateful that I have hands and that they do work to a certain point. But for me, it's just like, this is who I am and I can't change it. So I'm going to live my life to the fullest and just figure out what I can do and how I can do it.
I mean, and look at what you're doing. You know, so many people would say, well, obviously there's a limited speech impediment in there that could
Yep.
be, but why would you let that stop you when you clearly can do this and you're doing an amazing job at it in the process?
Thank you.
It is so sad that we limit people so much just by labels. Yeah.
Yep. And to be honest, I used to limit myself because of my speech impediment. When I first started this podcast, I stuttered all the time, like constantly. Like I couldn't get more than like one or two sentences out before starting. And I think it's because I have a podcast and I built my confidence because of that, that now I don't really stutter a whole lot. Like, yeah, it still happens, but it's so rare and it's just so off.
And let's face it, editing software helps if that becomes an issue. It doesn't have
Yep.
to be an issue because there are ways to work around it. It's
Yeah,
nuts that we limit people like that. Yeah, absolutely.
I know. Yeah, I agree. And we're talking about limitations, and with your family, what are some of the challenges that you face as a father?
That's a really interesting question. There's a lot that goes into it. I found initially I was my own limitation for understanding my family, and I think a lot of dads. You have to kind of speak in some generalizations here. So I apologize to anyone. I'm not labeling everybody the same way, but I think generalizations exist because there tends to be that's the way things are generally, and I think a lot of blokes will relate to and have related in the past to when I've said this kind of stuff. I went through a very bloke oriented response when I found out my daughter was likely autistic. I went through the whole realm of almost uh, the sort of 5 stages of mourning. Initially denial. There's nothing wrong with my daughter. She's absolutely fine. And then that goes on to bargaining. Well, if it's that, then maybe we can do this and that, and we can fix this, and she can be cured. And if you know anything about autism and neurodivergence, it can't be cured. More to the point, it doesn't need to be. So I had to sort of come to terms with that. And then you go into the sort of anger, why us? Why do we have to suffer this? And the depression. And then finally you reach that point of acceptance. And I think for a lot of people, it tends to be the mums. You see a lot of women in the neurodivergent advocacy realm because they're the ones who are at home most of the time with their kids. It's just the way the majority of families work. It's not saying it's right or wrong, but there aren't many blokes out there sort of doing what I do because they're not the ones who are at home with their kids, whereas I am. Because my wife is also neurodivergent and has some disabilities as well. I was forced to become a carer, which at the time was horrific to me because I'd always worked and be what they call economically active. But actually, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Being able to spend that time with my family and come to the understandings I have has been just a blessing in no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
And my son's ADHD, which he was diagnosed about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now.
Okay. And how old are your children?
So my son is 10 and my daughter is 15.
Okay. Uh, so yeah, you're right there. Where I feel like for me at least, middle school was kind of the hardest because it was like you're meeting new people, and the school system, at least where I'm at in America, it changes when you go to middle school. It's a totally different thing. And for
Yeah,
me, I had to figure out like what well, first I had to fight with the school because they didn't want me in mainstream classes, and we, wanted me in mainstream. So we had to fight through that. Are you experiencing any of that with the school system?
we've had some real challenges with the school system. So, excuse me. Um, so my daughter is in the UK. We call it SEND education, special educational needs and disability.
Okay, yep, we have something like that here.
Yeah. And so her profile on the spectrum is called PDA, as I said before, pathological demand avoidance. Makes it very challenging for her to exist in a traditional school environment because when someone says, go and do this, she won't do it. Her brain takes over and says, there's no way you're doing this because she needs to be in control
Mm,
or feel that she's in control. It takes very specialized people to be able to understand that and work around it and support her without just putting her into a situation where she's going to have a meltdown because her anxiety just peaks because she's being forced into things that she feels out of control in. So she is in SEND education. That happened quite early on. She struggled really badly with. So the first year, I think it's kindergarten in the States. We call it reception year here, and that is the first year of school essentially. So kind of
yep,
there's preschool, then you've got your reception year, which I think is like kindergarten there. In
yep,
Australia, it was
exactly.
called kindergarten, and then year one is year one. So she did the reception year, kindergarten year twice. And from that, it was basically understood she wasn't going to cope with the mainstream education. She wouldn't be able to deal with it emotionally or mentally. So she wound up in SEND education. And even then, people think SEND education or special educational needs education is going to be the answer. And in many ways it is. But there's no two, in the same way that no two people are the same, no two schools are the same, and no two SEND schools are the same. So, and even for a point where up to a stage, my daughter's school was fantastic, and then it stopped being able to meet her needs, and so there needed to be a shift to a different environment for her. With that understanding in place, when we realised he was ADHD, sorry, I'm going to just hold 1 second. My daughter is stomping down the stairs, and it's going to interrupt things. What are you doing? Quick, because I'm on. Sorry, I'm assuming you can edit this out.
Yeah, of course. I put a little marker on the clip so
The
I can
joys
take
of
it out.
family. It's all right.
Yeah.
She's
Oh,
just
yeah.
coming down to get herself some bits. Can you close the door?
No worries.
So yeah, so I'll let her go in. When she comes back out, we'll hold again. But so when we realised my son was ADHD, what we realised is that it was year four for him. So he had 2 years of school, of primary school we have here, and then that would be then into high school. And that's the transition. Going from primary to high school for him would be, that's where the ADHD is really going to kick in and be a challenge. He was coping really well with school at that point. So we got him diagnosed quite quickly. In the UK, it's difficult to get a quick diagnosis. We had to do it privately. So again, the closest thing I can relate the British system to is Obamacare that you have. 1 second.
Mm, yeah.
Sorry. Right. Love you. So the closest thing I can relate to in the US is Obamacare, which obviously Obama had started and Trump abolished. But in the UK, we don't have to have private health insurance. There is a national health service, NHS, and they take care of all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
it's very good if you're in low income families and you can't afford to be able to pay for private healthcare. But we actually ended up paying for private because it was just, we got him diagnosed within 2 weeks, where it would have been over 2 years to get him diagnosed through the NHS. And that would have been too late. That's when he'll be transitioning to high school.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that was the
Exactly.
choice we made. Yeah. But school's a real challenge. School's a real challenge for, I mean, I always come back to the Einstein quote, which is if you consistently evaluate a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it's always going to fail.
Yep.
And I think school systems in general, by necessity in many ways, have to be so general
Hmm.
that they don't work for so many people. And I mean, people like my daughter, she just wouldn't be able to cope in a mainstream environment. But by the same token, I think many people who would be assumed that they can't cope in a mainstream environment can flourish there. It depends on the person. Yourself, I guess, is already a good example. You're saying that you wanted to stick with mainstream because you were more than capable of getting through it.
Yeah. And for me, like I wanted to stay mainstream, but the school system did not because that would require me to have an aide who helped me like write and get my books and all that. So that's an extra expense on the school system, and then they didn't like that. But my parents thankfully fought for me to get that, and I was able to go mainstream my whole education, which was really helpful for me because I mean the special ed school system is great. It's really good, but they don't teach you everything that you get taught in mainstream. So,
No, it took me a while to adapt to I guess, the right way of thinking about, for my daughter at least,
yep.
for what SEND education, special education was, in the sense that it didn't make sense to me. It was almost like, you're going to go slower so she can catch up. Really? That's just, for her, it's actually focusing on the things that she will be able to do and enhancing that.
Mhm.
And there's a British comedian, guy called Jimmy Carr,
Oh, I
and
love him. He's awesome.
yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. A trigger warning: don't watch it if you're easily offended.
Exactly. That's for damn sure.
But he actually did a radio interview, and he was talking about the education system. And he said that we're so focused on all rounders. And he said, so, if someone's getting an A in math, but they're getting a C in physics, then sorry, D in physics. Well, let's get you up to a C in physics, because they're so focused on this all rounder thing. And he says, why? I'll tell you what the world doesn't need right now is another shit physicist. What they need is people who can focus on the things they're good at. So
Yeah.
stop trying to push people to be all rounders. And actually, the amount of people who've made such a massive difference in this world: Einstein, autistic. Don't like the guy, but Elon Musk, autistic. Steve Jobs, autistic. Bill Gates, autistic. Nikola Tesla, the scientist, autistic. Harry Seinfeld, autistic. Dan Aykroyd, autistic. So many scientific advancements have been made because of neurodivergent people, because they see the world in a slightly different way. So much comedy's been produced and amazing talent because people approach their craft in a different way. We need that. Like, we have two eyes because we see things from a slightly different perspective, and that gives us three dimensions. So if we all just saw the world through a neurotypical lens, it would be a very flat, two-dimensional world. We need these different perspectives.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do. I agree with that 100%. Now, I wanna touch on your podcast a little bit before we end this. Can you tell the audience more about what it's about and what you talk about on there?
Sure, it's sort of evolved over time, I suppose. When I started, I run a big group on Facebook. So we started it a good 5 years ago now. But when we were getting my daughter diagnosed, we were facing so many challenges to get to diagnosis, because it's still bad now, but back even 5 years ago, the perception of female autism was just not understood, and PDA even less so. So it was really hard getting a diagnosis in place. And so myself and a friend who also had an autistic daughter we sort of got together and started doing this, just a group on Facebook, because everything at the time was US based. There was very little that was focused on the UK. And we've got, over 80,000 members on that page now. But what I did notice was a lot of the same questions were coming up, and I'd pin articles and copy them into comments and send it out. But something I've learned over time is that a lot of people who have neurodivergent kids are neurodivergent themselves. And so reading a big article that's often very medical and scientific in its approach isn't a good thing. So I'd learnt enough by that point that I thought, well, I could just do basic versions of this and put it out there so that people can listen to it or watch it, or they can read the closed captions that YouTube put on for you. So I started doing it from that perspective. And it's interesting when you go back and watch the early videos. I'm sure you're the same. When you look at your early podcast, you think, what was I doing? I had no idea. It's almost embarrassing. But I
Yep.
actually keep my first one up there just because it's just little reminded me of just how far we have come. But over time, it was learning to, how we can better parent and care for our neurodivergent kids and autistic kids. But from that, it sort of grew into a real appreciation for the importance of neurodivergence in this world. And I went from that, you go from that acceptance into advocacy. And what I've now done is gone in from advocacy to almost a celebration, I think. So I just literally today put on an interview I did last week with a couple of chaps who were on a show. It's a British show on Amazon Prime TV called 007 Road to a Million. and there were contestants. It's a reality show. To kind of, they have challenges each week, and one team gets knocked off each week until only one remains. A very traditional thing, but it's all based in the James Bond world, which to me was fascinating because I find Bond has been very. I have good friends. Adam Pearson is a really good friend of mine. He was in a film recently called A Different Man with yeah, which was all about his own facial deformities. He's got a very deformed face. It's a brilliant film, Different Man. Go watch it. It's got Sebastian Stan, sorry. It's got Sebastian Stan on it. He's the main character who kind of gets healed of Adam's condition. And I find and it's something that Adam has a charity that he's associated with called Changing Faces. And they did a call out to the Bond franchise, which was, why are you always putting people who have facial difference into the villain role? Do you realize what damage that's doing? And so this duo, Dan and Dylan, Dan is the father. He has had to have an eye removed due to cancer. So he's got quite severe facial disfigurement and scarring now. And his son, Dylan, is autistic. And I thought it was just so awesome that these two were on it. And I reached out and interviewed them. So I do a lot of that now. I've managed to interview some really interesting people over time, some well known, some not well known. I managed to interview Mark Tremonti. So if you're familiar with the band Alter Bridge,
Mhm.
you'll be familiar with the band Creed, or
Yeah.
Tremonti. He's the guitarist in all those and the singer in Creed as well. And he did this album with Frank Sinatra covers, which seemed really left of field for a really heavy rock guy.
Right.
But it turns out his daughter was born with Down syndrome. And so I reached out and just said, I'd love to talk about it. And he was like, yeah, giddy up. So I've got this. He's one of my idols. I play a PRS guitar. It's hanging up to his he's one of my guitar heroes, if you like. I love his work. And especially with Alter Bridge. And yeah, here I was being able to interview about something that I was passionate about, which was disability and neurodivergence. He was obviously passionate about because his daughter's been born with Down syndrome, and he's just wanting the album sales all went to support the National Down Syndrome Society in the States. So
Wow.
fantastic, great thing. Yeah, I've had these opportunities to really sort of get into a community that's incredible,
Uh-huh.
and it's changed my perspective on how to view disability. And I say that with the knowledge that I'm as guilty as most people. Up until I was thrust into this world, I was an ignorant idiot. I made the same mistakes most people make. So I don't come from a judgmental perspective on others for the fact they don't understand. But I want to try and hopefully, as somebody who is neurotypical and other than being bald and ugly, not disabled really, but maybe hearing my voice amplifying the voices that are behind me, because what I never want to be guilty of is speaking over a community. I think that's so important. I think a lot of people who are neurodivergent get really resentful of neurotypical people speaking for them. So I don't want to do that. So wherever I can, I will interview people who are relevant to the topic rather than me speaking over a subject. I talk where I am as a parent, as a carer, as an advocate in that way, but I would rather hear the voices of the people who are really experiencing this stuff. Hence, people
Uh-huh.
like Eva Abley, who, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. I love what you're doing. You're helping so many people become aware of the situations that are going on, and that's huge.
I
So,
think the world
yep,
would be so much better if we could make it fit others rather than trying to just make everyone fit into a very standard mold. And
yeah,
that's kind
wouldn't
of
that
my
be
goal.
great? Yeah,
It's probably a pipe dream, but if I can do something, I'm being really selfish. All I want is for my daughter to have a better world for her to live in, and my wife and my son for who
yeah,
they are and their differences. So it's a selfish perspective I'm coming from in many ways, but
I don't think so.
it
I
is.
think
But
it's
I'm happy with
needed.
that.
Yeah, yeah, like it's needed. We all need to work together. to help each other. That's the bottom line. Everybody just needs to be okay with helping each other and, just make the world a better place.
Absolutely. It's also it sounds so high and mighty, doesn't it? And there's always a danger of that. That's
Yep.
one thing I'm aware of is that this perception we so readily judge others.
Hmm.
And I think when we take a step back sometimes and think, I was just as much of an asshole as everybody else is until I was thrust into this world. So I've got no right to judge anyone. But maybe if I can help tell my journey, maybe it'll help somebody else going through the same thing.
Yep. I think so. So for the listeners, how can they, reach out and follow you more and tell them where they can find your podcast?
The podcast is on YouTube. So it's a video podcast. And so it's PDA Dad UK. I'm on Facebook under PDA Dad UK. I'm on Instagram, but I don't use it very much. I need to get into that. I was on Twitter X, but I'm still technically there, but I never go on it anymore. I can't stand it now.
Yeah.
It's become such a toxic environment. So yeah, but pretty much any social media platform you'll find me there somewhere. But best place to reach out is either through Facebook or YouTube. Watch and one of the things I with and not just myself, but if you're passionate about this stuff yourself or you're moved and you want to do something about it, start sharing, liking these videos that other people are making, not just myself, because YouTube pick up on that, and it means they push it out to other people, and the message gets out. So I don't make any money off YouTube. It has ads, but that's actually only because they promote it more when their ads are on there.
Yep.
I don't actually make any impact. It costs me more money than I make from it, but I'm just passionate about the message. So doing things like that, just hitting the subscribe button and maybe clicking a like or even commenting,
Yep.
go for it. And as I say, not just for me. If there's someone here you think is doing a great job and, yourself, people should be on there, you know, hit subscribe, share this stuff because it's such an important message. And the more we can get in people's ears, the better.
I agree. I agree. And before we wrap this up, I gotta ask you. So, my slogan is your abilities are infinite. What does that mean to you?
It's it's a tricky one. Because I agree with it. I think in fact, you can correct me here or tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think you've chosen that because it stops people limiting. We got to stop limiting people's possibilities. I can't fly. I'm never going to fly. I'm a fat, bald idiot. Like it's going to take more than a few feathers to get my ass up in the air. But you know that we got to stop limiting people. And the more we can let people flourish for who they are, and we've done it in so many ways in this world now, whether it's your sexuality or your race or your religion, we've become a lot more accepting. But it seems to me that the last ism that really isn't taken care of is ableism. And it's because all the other isms take a change of heart and a change of mind. Ableism often requires not just a change of heart, not just a change of mind and attitude, but it might take an investment that's financial. Putting a ramp into a shop costs money. Putting lifts into buildings so that people who are wheelchair users can get up to the top floors takes money. And I think that's why we hit this larger thing. But I think we've got to get past that and start seeing that equality that everyone talks about. We've got a long way to go with all of it. I'm not saying, hey, we've hit perfect balance with everything else, but it needs, ableism is something we've really got to start looking at as being something that we could really change and make a difference with.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. And you were right. I did pick that slogan for that reason. I
Yeah.
want people to understand that you can do more than you think, and you can do a lot more than what other people tell you can do.
Not only that, you, people who understands anybody else really. I'll tell you an interesting thing with the autistic community. People will often say that autistic people don't empathize. What you actually find when you get to know some autistic people is that the opposite is true.
Mhm.
My daughter feels so much empathy, she has to kind of shut it down because it's overwhelming. So it's actually the opposite to what people think. But her brain has to kind of, I can't cope with this right now. I have to shut this off so that she can come across as unempathetic. But you give her the opportunity, she, out a while back and there was a homeless bloke. She literally just bought a treat for herself, which was a bar of chocolate. And she went up and gave it to him,
Oh,
which, I mean, it was a couple of years ago, this, and it was just, for her, that was a big deal. And that's what that's what I want my daughter to be. And she's empathetic. She really does feel these things. And likewise, most autistic people, some might not, but let's face it, in all walks of life, you get people who are better at empathizing than others. It's, yeah.
you that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for being on the show. This was really great, and I know that just by us having this chat right now, we helped a lot of people.
That's the whole point, isn't it? And yeah, I would say to anyone, don't feel bad about how you might have been until hearing a message like this. It's not about who you were; it's who you're going to be tomorrow, and how can you be a better person tomorrow than you were today. And if we can all go through life like that, we're in for a treat, I reckon.
All right, everyone, you heard it from Duncan. You can always be better tomorrow. So thank you, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
If you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and share it on your Instagram story and tag me in the Nick Yerhart. Also, go ahead and share it anywhere else that you see fit, because the only way that I can grow this is by you guys sharing it. I don't sell anything on here. I don't have any sponsors, so let's just get it out there by word of mouth and help more people. Alright, everyone, remember your abilities are infinite.